Welcome, everyone. This is the first time I'm doing the silent talk, but I hope you're having a good Unite. And my name is Amir Ebrahimi. I'm an engineer in our labs group and technical lead on EditorVR, which we showed here last year during our keynote. And today we're going to build an EditorVR tool. So you've seen probably a lot of scene editing with any of our demos that we've shown. And one of the things I'm hoping to do and to show is how EditorVR can actually be used in a production, as opposed to just moving things around. So our takeaways for today are that I'm hoping to impart to you for your teams that you can embrace design ambiguity as part of that process of building VR content. And to do that, you need to architect your systems to be adaptable so that you can answer those requests of feature changes with yes, yeah, we can definitely do that. And then, what I'm looking to show today is how you can build your tools up to meet your team at that level of creativity. And I like to reference I was going to say a talk, but it's actually a blog post from Paul Graham back in 93. He had an essay called Programming Bottom Up. And he's referring to the Lisp programming language because of its extensive macro functionality and essentially how you're building up your language to meet you with how you want to be programming for your application. So I don't usually include a slide about myself, but I've gotten feedback that it helps people put things in context if they know a little bit about my background. So this is my 15th year in the game industry, and I started at Naughty Dog as an intern and eventually became a game programmer there. And I've worked for a variety of different companies in different roles. So, and at one point I even went to visual effects for a while and worked on their R&D team. This is my second time back at Unity. Originally I wrote a game developer magazine review about Unity 1.5, and then I reached out to the company and asked Joachim, where's your Windows version? He's like, well, actually, we're hiring developers. And I didn't actually join the company at that time, but joined them not too long after. And then in 2011, I started a company with some other people. We made a mobile game and used a chunk of my own money and then went through the funding rounds and had that fun. And our mobile game didn't do well, so we shut our doors in 2015. And I've worked on a lot of different aspects of game production, so even to the level of knowing how you rig a model, a little bit of texturing, a little bit of modeling. And I'd say at this point I feel like I can understand the production process quite well. So some of my guiding principles and what influences the way that I work are, don't look for shortcuts. So do what's necessary, and that does come through in the code that you write. Because a lot of times, like, you might encounter a hard problem, and because of momentum, you want to maybe walk around that issue, and I would encourage you to solve those hard problems the best you can in that time, and not take shortcuts. And then be willing to stretch, and do other things. As an individual, being willing to stretch and do things that others don't normally want to do. I mean, when I started at Naughty Dog, I did all of the sound files and processing, and that for me works at Unity too, where I don't like to put something on another team necessarily to try and work on. Like, if there's a feature I need, I will be willing to do that work with their team, with internally, if we can have agreement on what it is we actually want. So I also believe that anything's possible with enough time and effort. So I used to be in that camp of programmers where your designer comes to you and the first thing that you normally say when they ask for something is like, no, it can't work that way. We didn't build the system that way. And now I like to, part of building software that can be adaptable is to allow for those changes. And then another one, which I learned from a good friend of mine, it's not important just to figure out what problem you're trying to solve, but also see clarity among your team members. So make sure that you're all actually seeing the same thing, because a lot of times you can get in a meeting room and you throw up the problem and throw out a few things about what you're going to do, and then quickly run off and start working on stuff. And I think that then when you come back together, you'll find that you're actually looking at things differently. And then the final one I would say is having owned my own company, doing the personal work. I know that's weird to bring up at a technical conference, but we are human beings. We're not automatons. So making sure to do the work that's necessary at a personal level so that you can work with your team members well. I feel like I can't breathe with this thing because I can hear myself. 1 second. Yeah, Unity Labs. So we've been exploring problem spaces that are 1, 3, and 5+ years out, and EditorVR was one of those experiments that we did, and it was meant to look at how we could improve authoring tools in the VR space. So we set out in 2015 with this experiment, and I like to show. We've shown enough of our own videos or online. I like to show EditorVR from the viewpoint of one of our developers who are supporting it. So if you haven't seen this video, I think it's pretty cool. It shows multi-user editing in VR in EditorVR. So with this, this is available today. You can use this with EditorVR. With each new version, they continue to support it and add functionality. But let's move on to the challenges. So with EditorVR, it's editing in edit mode, but we need certain functionality where it feels like a play mode because we animate in edit mode, and we have to handle input and the HMD obviously. So there were a lot of issues that we had to address, and not all. I'm not going to go into all of these, except for one today, which is adaptability. So we started out with this prototype, and most of it was in play mode initially, and it was built to be a prototype, but unfortunately, we had started demoing. So we demoed it for the first time at our Vision Summit in January 2016. And of course, to show momentum, we kept adding features to that demo. The final demo we did was at Unite Europe last year. And the question in my mind was, when are we going to reboot this thing and actually build it for the long term? Because there was a lot more to the prototype than, while it worked for our needs, I know that whatever we're building, you guys might have a completely different workflow. So a lot of this was about building a platform that's easily extensible and can support a developer tool, developer tools that could be sold in the asset store. So our solution was to decouple everything. So there are no singletons. You won't reference an EditorVR object in your code. And then even internally within our own systems, nothing is allowed to reach up above its level of management or of class management. I mean, it's anything that is spawned by a parent object gets everything it needs. And so there's no reaching up into a higher level to get any additional functionality. So we use interfaces in two ways. We use it in the standard way, which is as contracts. So when you're building a tool, you would implement iTool, and that declares that this is a tool to the system. We also use interfaces in terms of functionality injection. So inspired by inversion of control and dependency injection, you would implement an interface, and then you would get services from the system. This will make more sense in a second when I show the tools. But what this allows for is it allows you to swap things out. So if you think of a locomotion system, you might have one tool which is blink locomotion. You might have another one which is like, I've seen the movement where you're like basically moving your hands, and you want to be able to swap between those. So by making use of interfaces in your tooling, you can enumerate all those and then allow a menu to easily swap between them. And the hope with that too is that you don't necessarily need to throw away something you've done. You can have that sit side by side something new that you're building. So whether you're working for whether you're working with EditorVR or your own VR content, I really encourage you to allow that kind of swappability as we discover what it is we want to be making in VR. So my takeaway for this is, build a system that supports continually changing requirements. Make that part of the system instead of trying to nail down specifics about what you're building. And you can look at our code. It's all online on GitHub. And this is a quick bit.ly link that points directly to the interface, the interface part of connecting up interfaces. But let me move on. So when I originally did this talk or planned this, I would build it from the ground up just so that you could see in 1 hour you can go from having the Steam SDK to building a game and putting art in and have it actually playable. And if you haven't tried out the lab from Steam, let me show you a quick video of what that is so you'll know before I hop into that. And Personal Edition is the new Pro. So I was told it's easier for you guys to read things when it, instead of using the dark skin for Unity. So, okay, so if you download SteamVR, you're going to get, all of their SDK, but they also give you a few prefabs and scenes. They have one scene called the interactions example, and if you run it, it's simply a bunch of points that you can teleport to. You know what? This was happening earlier. I gotta fix this. I didn't have time to calibrate the setup here, but I should do it. Yeah. Okay, so they give you, they give you a teleporter to start with. Yeah, this is going to be annoying. It's okay, we'll just keep going. So they give you teleporter. They give you different objects you can throw. But what I found when I was looking for examples is we don't, on the asset store and on Oculus, Oculus's download page and Steam, luckily Steam has at least one thing that is game-like that you can use and make a game from, and that's the bow and arrow from the lab. That's all they give you, though. They don't give you any of the assets. So I thought, I can do something with that. But I look at our asset store, and there are a lot of different examples of picking things up, but nothing that you could just run with. So initially, what you would want to do is take that scene and strip it down. So we stripped it down to, just the longbow part of that. The other thing you're going to want to do is make sure you reduce your iteration time. So every time that I have to go teleport over to something, and I've already set this up where I spawn right next to Oh, good, that's on maximize. I spawn right next to it, so I can just go ahead and shoot this. Getting some tracking issues. Just shoot this bow and arrow. So you'll notice I'm taking my headset off. That's part of the point of EditorVR, is that you could just build all this directly in VR. So what they give you is they give you that Weeble that you can shoot at, and they give you the bow and arrow, but there's no gameplay in there. So what we would do is we'd simply add a sequencer to it. And what that would look like is, a simple script. And I'll go ahead and launch Visual Studio in the background. But as that's launching, I'll explain it. So the sequencer allows you to set the next Weeble that you're going to shoot at so that it can enable it after you've shot the current one. Pretty simple. And then, for the first one, you want to turn off everything else except the first one when you start up. So there's a field for that, to keep the first one enabled. Yeah, so there's our first one right here, and then it points to the second one right behind it. So, and I'll show you the script. It's pretty simple. Oh, give me 1 second. I just got to adjust the player up. So after I shoot this one, it'll spawn the second one, and then I can shoot that. So, at this point, we could, bring in a designer. They could start to build out more of the level. So if we fast forward to the next stage of that, oh yeah, I said I'd show you the code. I mean, it's pretty simple. It's a, 38 lines of code. It's basically just setting the next object active and a small coroutine. And the way that SteamVR has their object set up is they give you an event for when that thing takes damage, and then you can send a message to another object. So we send a complete message to our sequencer. So if we fast forward and we've added some more functionality, maybe we've added another row of these things. I won't go and play it because you'll know. We'll just go in the sequence. One of the things, though, that although Unity is easy to build out custom tools and put your own custom scripts, it's not easy necessarily for a designer to know about a specific component or to have to wire this up. So you could build something in 2D, but ultimately they're going to be testing it in 3D. So it would be great if you could just build a tool directly in 3D. But first, let me show you what it would look like if we were wanting to duplicate a row of these things in 2D. So I'd have to clone them, move them back. But then, I would need to hook up each one to the next one. So if I wanted this one to go to the center, I'd select here, and then I would drag this Weeble over into the object that it's going to enable next. And then that would be that one, and then I would set up each additional one. Oh, that was there we go. But, this is error prone. If I did something wrong, then, I won't know until I put the headset on. And I need to adjust this one as well. So yeah, I'd put the headset on and, maybe I got it right, but maybe I didn't. So tracking is a little weird up here. So we'll just see if one of the first ones in the back. So the back row came in there. So obviously that, it's doable but not desirable. So let's pop into EditorVR. And actually, let me switch over to a new scene. That adjustment. Okay. Make sure I'm on presentation mode. Yeah, this will be easier for you guys to watch rather than the shaky cam. I guess I've scaled up my world. So we're in EditorVR now. And I've got my whole scene here. Even without custom tools, I could at least move objects around, and test those out. If I wanted to hop in, I could go into play mode. There we go. I could try that out. And if for any reason one of these was too hard to hit, I could pop back out into EditorVR and make adjustments. Like I could pull that forward. But the power comes once we start to build out custom tools. So I could just have my sequencer tool where I can drag the connections that I want directly to it. So this one actually just goes in a loop. But let's say I wanted to go a different direction. Then I could just immediately try that out. And see if I like that progression. Like maybe that one is still too far away. So then I can pop back out and pull that in. But one of the cool things is not only did I not need to know about a specific component, I could give any kind of tools to my designers that I want. And this is pretty basic. The whole point of this tool was to show how you could build something in under an hour. But let's fast forward a little bit. So, once you've got that basic functionality in, then you could easily layer in more of the environment. And that's where things get, really fun because now, I had that same layout, but I was able to put these columns underneath. So I could even use some of the other features of EditorVR, like our Miniworld, which gives me a miniature version of the world. And I could move these things around as I please. Then also, I could place new scenery if I wanted. I could either take something that's already in the scene and clone it. And we've got snapping in EditorVR now, so I could just snap that to a place that I like. Or, I could spawn my project workspace and pick out some new art assets. Yeah, so maybe I want another mound. And throw that out there. So, and then, I could go back easily to using my sequencer tool and, maybe clone out additional versions of these. So, if I want to add another one of these, I can just clone it. Then I can easily hook it up. And there we go. And I haven't had to exit out of VR to do that. I can easily go back and switch into play. And I don't know what I did with that one, but anyway, I'm almost at time. Yeah, so let's go back to so let's do a recap. Oh, what's going on? It's always hard to switch back to PowerPoint after. Yeah, that's not going to work. Let me just duplicate the screen. Even VR demos are probably one of the hardest things. So yeah, ultimately, let me go back into. Okay, yeah. So ultimately, if you're building stuff for VR, you want to preview it in VR, and iteration is key. So anything you can do to help that, I think you'll be able to produce better VR projects. EditorVR is one option to do that. There's certainly other ways of doing it. You could build your own custom tools in your game. And it's available now as an experimental build, so you can download it from GitHub. And functionality injection is one way to allow for adaptability in your projects. So I usually like to end on this, to inspire maybe some projects that you guys will work on. I'm hoping at some point to see completely virtual reality produced film, and where you have your set designers in VR. Maybe you're using Scene Fusion for that, and your actors are mo-capped and their data is going straight into the editor, and you have your director there, your videographers. I think that'd be pretty cool. And then the question is, does it go to VR? Are you producing VR content, a film for VR, or are you producing it for the flat screen? I don't know. At one point, I was hoping to have like a virtual book reading in the book environment, but that's already happened. That happened last year. So education, it would be cool to have virtual reality instructors that essentially have a sandbox that you could hop in, and maybe they're tutoring students, and they have a bunch of things that they can work with, and you could like zoom into the nano level and teach about electrons, or so I think that's a cool experiment I'd like to see. And then this one is kind of weird. It's the idea of like renting a peripheral or drone somewhere else and taking a real life tour. Once we have better 360 streaming, so I can control this drone from like way far away, but I could, maybe it'd be more important for live concerts or something like that. But I could have control over where I'm actually viewing this 360 content from. So some food for thought. As you have your own VR productions, I think communication and alignment matter within your team. That's really important, and almost more important than the product itself. I know it's kind of weird, but like if you can't stay aligned as a team, it doesn't matter how great the idea is. You might be doomed to fail. But on the flip side, it's not just building a great product that you need. You also need to have room for marketing and a lot of other things that enable success. And there's no time like the present. So when you're solving problems, I would suggest that you go as deep as you can with the amount of time you have, and don't get paralyzed. But definitely, don't necessarily kick the can forward with your project, with a problem that you have. And that's it. So thank you.